Hello, everybody. Nice to be in the room with you. I'm imagining all your faces. My name is Desiree Gordon. I am the Director of Programs and Strategies at the Brooklyn Arts Council, and it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural session of Slated, Talk Tuesdays with Filmmakers. Slated is being presented by the Brooklyn Arts Council's Brooklyn Innovation Institute, but co-presented and co-produced by the phenomenal Crystal Whaley. And you know, because the Brooklyn Innovation Institute and the Brooklyn Arts Council at large is really all around interested in building capacity in the field through all our programs, whether it's re-grants, fiscal sponsorship, arts and education. This Slated Talk Tuesdays with Filmmakers feels like it's just so mission aligned, so central, and so critical right now, as we're all sort of weathering the storms of COVID, as we're all noticing the momentum that social media and video is giving to our collective instincts around human rights and social justice. This conversation about how to make the skills and knowledge around production, video production, web production accessible to more people just feels timely. And so, you know, it's a privilege to be able to do it and to do it with the likes of Crystal. Crystal Whaley is an executive producer, creative director, and a development executive, and I might add an Emmy Award winning one. She's a multiple Emmy Award winning creative producer, development executive, and in film, TV, and digital, offering a unique combination of skills that comes from 20 years of, you know, experience in content development and acquisition. She has developed, produced, and directed and supervised TV series, commercials, music videos, and nationally syndicated and Peabody nominated documentaries for PBS and TLC. She's the owner and creative director of Plan C Media Group. She's also the former VP of Development and Production at Pixel Media, Lionsgate, as well as a former senior producer for Sesame Workshop. She's also the former director of video production for Arista Records and former executive producer for Free Spirit Films Incorporated. A myriad of commercials, music videos, and award-winning artists have been in her wheelhouse. She's a lover of the arts, so she's also a published photographer. She's an accomplished curator. Projects that she's been involved in include Altar, Prayer, Ritual, and Offering at Photoville, September 2018. And she is also the producer and deputy director of critically acclaimed photo books such as Am Shawn, Women Photographers of the African Diaspora, and Black Joy and Resistance. She is the founding curator for the project Madeir, Reclaiming Our Seat at the Table. We can't miss out and not say that Crystal is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and holds a journalism degree from Howard and a film production certificate from NYU. I want you all to know that as much of a mouthful as that was, I did not say all of her accomplishments. So, and I'm sharing that. I wanted to take the time to do that just to make sure we have an understanding of how special the company we are in is. Thank you so much, Crystal, for being here with us, for leading us in Slated.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Desiree, for that really wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. And welcome to all of you out there. Welcome to the first installment of Talk Tuesday with Filmmakers. And I want to introduce you to this amazing woman. And to my left or right, I'm not quite sure how you're seeing it, but this is the phenomenal director, writer, filmmaker, Stacey Muhammad. I'm going to read just a little bit of her bio, and then we're going to get into our Talk Tuesday. Stacey Muhammad was one of 13 directors chosen by the Directors Guild of America and the Association of Independent Commercial Producers for the inaugural Commercial Directors Diversity Program. Her digital series, For Color Boys Redemption, was named one of the top digital series by IndieWire. And as a writer, director, and producer, she continues to receive rave reviews for her cinematic approach and distinctive style to storytelling and for creating emotionally charged, character-driven stories. Stacey's recent work includes directing episode 411 of Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar series for OWN, serving as director and co-executive producer on multiple docuseries projects, including From the Bottom Up, directing the Being Mary Jane after shows, and directing the award-winning short film The Creed, starring Yolanda Ross from The Chi. Stacey is currently in development with her first feature film titled The Return. And she's a New Orleans native, y'all. She is also in production on her latest feature documentary project entitled Second Line. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'm good. I would say I'm good now.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
weird and rough.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a bit of a precarious time. A lot, you know, and we're dealing with a lot, and you know, we're trying to find places that we can find beauty and find joy, and some of those spaces and places are creating our stories through our particular lens. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that. As I mentioned, Stacey is a director and a writer, so we're going to get into it. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Stacey. So tell me, or tell us a little bit about how you got started. Did you start writing first and then started directing? Where did this passion of storytelling come from?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've always been an artist. So I started, and I started as a dancer. Like I was at Ailey for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Dancing my entire life, ballet dancer, and you know, I mean, it's all storytelling.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got a manager a few years back, a different manager than I have now, that said that she could tell that I was a dancer from my work. So I didn't even really think about the ways that this is just one language of storytelling. So I've always been an artist, and I was in my maybe like mid-20s when I became aware of Haile Gerima.
Yes.
Writer director of Sankofa and a host
Yes.
of amazing films, and professor of film at Howard University.
Howard University.
Yeah, and at the time I was living in DC, and I mean, so I was an artist, but I was very much an activist. Like at the time I was in the Nation of Islam, you know, like I was an activist. And for me, like I wasn't thinking about a filmmaking career per se. I felt, you know, I kind of viewed storytelling and filmmaking as an avenue for my activism. So, you know, my earlier films and whatever it was a short doc or whatever, it was just very much infused with whatever activist, you know, thing was going on at the time. Whatever was happening was kind of like what I was talking about. So anyway, I took just about every workshop there was about film and writing. Initially I was just writing because I wasn't thinking about like a film career, you know, and I thought about what was accessible to me at the time, which was I can write, like I can get to the page. I might not be able to get to the camera right now, but I can get to the page. And so I took just about every filmmaking workshop there was for filmmakers at the time in DC. And it was helpful. I mean, some of it was pretty ridiculous. I mean, you know, we were told things like, you know, these are the type of stories that you have to tell if you want to make it in Hollywood. So Hollywood wasn't even in my mind.
Right.
And then I took classes with Professor Gerima at Sankofa, right across the street from Howard University. I took all of my earlier writing and directing and producing classes with him. And I think learned through him that I could not just be a filmmaker, but be the type of filmmaker that I wanted to be, tell the type of stories that I wanted to tell. And he was just so patient with his art. You know, I think like in the earlier days, and even now, I mean, people are just in such a rush for things to happen in their lives, in their career. Like, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And sometimes, oftentimes, it's to the detriment of the art, it's to the detriment of the story. So I think like taking those earlier classes with him kind of prepared me for the long journey. So yeah, and then I moved to New York and went to film school. And in New York is where I really got, you know, I mean, because a lot of people who are in New York in the independent film community, they came out of Spike's camp.
Right.
And they're so readily available and like willing to come and jump on your set. And of course they know what they're doing because they coming out of Spike's camp. So I met like Michael Boogie Pinkney, who became like one of my producing partner to this day, and Attica Torrance, and like all these people who were like, you know, in it. And so I really built my career in Brooklyn as a filmmaker. You know, I mean, of course, Spike was one of my earliest influences, and I was like, I gotta be a Black filmmaker in Brooklyn. I have to do this at some point in my career. And so I spent like 8 years in Brooklyn making films. And as time went on, I was like, oh, I could actually do this, right? And I did the I Am Shawn Bell film, and it did so well on the festival circuit that talks about, you know, that from there on, it was like, oh, well, I could actually have a filmmaking career.
Right.
Which wasn't even anything that I was really thinking about initially. So that's kind of like how I got started.
Okay. Would you say that I Am Shawn Bell was kind of like the pinnacle kind of start of you really believing that you were a filmmaker and can really kind of do this as a living?
Yeah, I mean, I was working at HBO at the time,
Okay.
in like the shipping department and the media library. And I was like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker. And they were like, yeah, cool, great. And you know, and it was like all the film festivals that I wanted to enter were HBO sponsored, so I couldn't enter as an HBO.
Right.
And I was like, why the hell am I like chilling in the shipping department when I could be entering? So when I left HBO, the following year, I went back to HBO as an award winner.
That's
with
right.
I Am Shawn Bell documentary.
Absolutely.
All these awards at HBO and a Media That Matters Film Festival. And so for me, the Shawn Bell film was a 10-minute short doc, obviously on Shawn Bell. And it went around the world. Like it went on an international worldwide tour with Media That Matters and HBO. And I was like, this is amazing. I mean, one, like it was just really, it did amazingly on the festival circuit. But I'm like, people all around the world now know about Shawn Bell because it is 10-minute film. So it, you know, for me, it was just like extremely obvious, like, wow, like I can do what I want to do in terms of being a storyteller and activist through film. I can also have a career doing this. So yeah, that was the film that kind of like opened my eyes to all of the possibilities.
That's fantastic. And take us through a little bit about the trajectory from that particular film to the other things that you've been able to do, like kind of like a brief kind of career trajectory from there.
So like I said earlier, like for me, it was like the page was available. So I was writing. Initially in Brooklyn, like I was like, okay, so I can make short films. This is what I'm able to, this is what I can afford to do. I wasn't trying to stress myself initially. I'm like, I'm not trying to make a feature film, right? Like I love being on set. I love telling stories. I'm like, I can tell these short form stories. We can make these documentaries that are about things that are happening in our communities that we need to amplify. And so I would do short docs, right? So I did a documentary, Out of Our Right Minds, Black Women and Depression. And I just did a series of short docs. And then I would get hired, usually by BET, to come in and produce, you know, various content on police brutality, on whatever's happening in the community. Like I was that activist, filmmaker, director, producer, person that folks would call on and do things like that. And all along, I knew I wanted to do a scripted project. But I also knew that in my mind, I didn't have what I needed to do a scripted project. And folks were like, when are you gonna, and I'm like, I'm just not gonna light this with lamps and just be crazy. Like this has gotta look the way it's gotta look. Cause I've always been like, you know, a stickler for production quality. And so I wasn't gonna embark upon that until I was ready. And so For Color Boys started as a docu-series because again, I had enough skills to go out with my camera and shoot like short docs. And I had producing partners to help me do that. So we started For Color Boys as a docu-series. And when I wrote the short script for Color Boys and was like, okay, I'm just gonna hold on to this because who knows when I'm gonna be able to shoot it. Um, and I met a young white guy, Anders Ermacher, who read the script and said, I want to shoot this for you. I want to shoot it for free. I don't.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and he at the time, like he owned like the Red, like when the Red was just becoming popular, it looked like a transformer, like the real big.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right. And he was like, I would love to shoot this. He was like, these are things that I'm passionate about. Like, he was like, I don't feel like I should even mess with this from a writing perspective or a directing perspective because of my privilege. However, I would be honored to support you in that. And so we did the short film for Color Boys. And the response was so overwhelmingly positive that we did an Indiegogo campaign to raise money to do an entire season. And before I knew it, you know, I had embarked upon the scripted world of film and did what people thought was, I mean, I guess pretty good work, you know.
Yes,
Filmmakers who had embarked upon scripted world for the first time, and was blessed to get amazing actors like Rob Morgan and Tim Reed and Hassan Riddick and Polito McCullum. And, you know, I would just ask, you know, maybe I didn't know better, but I would just say, hey, you know, I'm a filmmaker and I wrote this, and send the script. People loved it. And it just kind of went from there. And so for Color Boys opened up a lot of doors for me. And from there, I mean, for me, it's just been about continuing to create work, you know. There are a lot of things I want to do, a lot of things I've wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But to me, the path to that is just doing the work and then, you know, being ready when the opportunities come.
But before you, when you were just doing the small docs yourself, were you self-funded? Was that all you and your money and your money management skills trying to get all the stuff together?
Yeah, or friends.
Right.
When I did for Color Boys, I met Mark Lamont Hill. He and I were both repped at the time by April Silver of Aquila for songs. What's up, April? Yeah. And so she, you know, did amazing things for my career early on. Like with For Color Boys, she would get me press and Essence and Ebony, and like all the Black outlets were like really supportive of my work. And she hooked me up with Mark. And Mark saw For Color Boys and got on early on to support it. And so from the moment I met Mark, he has been my funding producing partner.
Okay.
From that moment on to this moment, if there's something that I want to do, you know, Mark will pay for it. I guess you can say. I mean, it you know, it's not like an endless amount of money, but
I understand. Yeah.
We have, you know, been blessed to kind of be in a position to say, hey, I have this short film idea and I want to do this, and it'll cost that, and he'll, you know, find a way, put the money together and support us to get it done. And so right now we have like a feature-length doc that we're working on and some other short films that we're working on. And yeah, it's been amazing to have the support so far. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. And that kind of brings us to, before we get into kind of the creative nuts and bolts, really, how do you protect yourself? Like, for instance, in terms of, even when you have your funding partner, are you separate from your business? You have a production company, Wildseed Films.
Yeah.
And so when did you decide that it was important for you to be separate from you, Stacey Muhammad, to be completely separate from your production company? And why did you choose to do that?
Well, early on, I mean, I think it was kind of like my mindset all along. Like, you know, I always just had companies like LLC. And, you know, early on, even when I worked, like I used to work in the HIV/AIDS community as a desktop publicist, and I had a graphic design business, and I just knew to separate my personal financial life from my business, and that there were certain perks and things that were available to me as a small business owner. There were certain things that I could write off, and certain, you know, advantages I would have if I had a small business, an LLC, or even a nonprofit. But with the film stuff, so I always had Wildseed Films, but when I got like into the episodic world and established a separate company for that, because, you know, they'll kill you with taxes if you're in there trying to do it on your own. So yeah, it's always been separate for me. And that, you know, I think, you know, people, the thing about it is like a lot of time creatives don't have the business aspect of it down packed, and it's exhausting, right? So I think that it's important to seek support, you know, to get help from people who know about it. I mean, there are a lot of resources out there, but anytime you can set up an LLC or a corporation, a C Corp, an S Corp, you know, a nonprofit, you know, it's definitely advantageous to kind of look into what those perks are, but it's always been separate for me. And Mark and I have a separate company, 1930 Productions, that's separate from Wildseed Films. And then my company, Lila Mae Productions, named after my grandmother, is the company that I use for my episodic work. So I have different companies for different types of work, but they're all separate from my own personal finances, thank God.
Thank goodness, and that makes the best sense. So I'm glad that we spoke about that, because a lot of people aren't very clear. They think, or they might think that it might be easier to do their creative work in their name, and it really can cause a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to set up. I mean, I think people think it's a lot more difficult to set up a business than it is. I mean, I think it's more challenging when you get to like taxes, and that's where you definitely need support. But I mean, it's really simple to set up a business. I mean, my Lila Mae Films, I set that up online in a day, opened up a checking account, and you know, was able to receive my payment without them taking half of my money. And
exactly, half up front. And then you're also able to then navigate how you want to pay your taxes, if it's going to be quarterly, yearly, you know, and just really kind of find somebody, a good accountant, or a good accountant probably, or bookkeeper, to kind of, you know, help you schedule out how you're going to make those payments.
Right. And the other thing that I'll say is that a lot of this stuff is available for free. I mean, I think, again, it's overwhelming for creatives sometimes. I think you get to a certain point in your career where you have to have certain things in place. And especially when you get to the point where you have, you know, managers and agents and folks that are taking money out of your money before you even see it. Right. So, I mean, but a lot of that support, there are like free and low cost legals resources and accounting resources. So just, you know, do your due diligence. You'll find what you need. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So let's segue into the creative stuff. Now, how do you, besides your activist work, are there any other ways that you kind of generate some of your ideas?
Oh, wow. I mean, you know, ideas are everywhere. The challenge for me is to narrow it down.
Right. I can't talk about all of these things, but let me get here.
I mean, there's a movie everywhere, you know, aside from the fact that everybody has a movie idea. You know,
everyone has a movie.
Like, but yeah, I mean, you know, the thing for me is kind of like not so much transitioning from the activist filmmaker, but realizing that there are a lot of stories that I want to tell. I mean, they're all stories of substance and consequence, because, you know, to some extent that's who I am, kind of, sort of. But you know, for me, it's more so like a genre thing. So my first feature film that I'm working on right now is a horror film. And I was just attached to direct another feature film that's a horror film. And so I love horror and sci-fi. Folks wouldn't know that from the work that I've done. You know, I've written a lot of comedy. Folks wouldn't know that. But in terms of ideas, I mean, it's hard to answer that question because they're everywhere. I mean, I think the bigger thing is, you know, whatever the idea is, just to really flesh it out, you know. And I know we'll talk about writing at some point, but like when I write, before I'm actually in my script, you know, I'm spending so much time doing research. I'm spending so much time, you know, studying, you know, walking, thinking, conceptualizing, crafting characters before I'm even in the actual script. So I think ideas are one thing, but like the development of an idea, I think, is what we need to do more of.
Absolutely. So speaking of kind of developing those ideas and kind of narrowing down which ones are speaking to you louder, you know how some characters kind of come to you like, I'm here.
Yes.
Do you find that there are specific characters that you've been thinking about or dreaming about that need to find a vehicle to get out? Or is it kind of generally the idea first and then the characters come?
let's say the last thing is the
or is it generally like your idea, like an idea of something, and then your characters then kind of find their way, or is the character in your being that needs a vehicle
right
to get out?
It depends. I mean, for instance, the project that I have, Finding Forever, which is about the older woman and the younger man, was much more about that particular character that needed to speak. Project that I have, The Return, which is about a haunted plantation, is about the idea. And I've struggled tremendously with the character because she hasn't been speaking to me.
Okay.
She's a protagonist, and it's weird, right? I mean, it's something that I'm conceptualizing, but there's something very spiritual and very otherworldly about storytelling when you're really in it and really connected. And I think but when you're really, I think, doing it for the right reasons, or you're connected to it authentically, I don't know. There's something else happening, because this is something that I conceptualize, but I've been having a difficult time connecting with the protagonist that I conceptualize.
Right.
She is who she is. And I have to find her. So there's always spirit work going on in storytelling, if we are aware of it or not.
Right.
So something's always trying to get out. Sometimes it's the character, sometimes it's the idea. Again, like with Finding Forever, I had the character down pat. You know, I knew what her struggles were, I knew what her issues were. It was very easy for me to relate to her. We have a lot in common, but it was more so like fleshing out this idea, like, how is this different? We've seen stories about older women and younger men before. Like, how is this different? What's unique about this? You know, what's more substantive about this, possibly? What's more impactful about this? You know, not making one thing more important than something else. Just thinking about how we can tell some of these stories in new ways. And again, with The Return, you know, I thought the idea was gold, but literally have been struggling with trying to connect to a protagonist that doesn't look like me, a protagonist that has a certain level of privilege, as a white woman, right? As a white woman of a certain economic status, as a white woman with a certain background, without the types of considerations and fears that I have in this world. Right. But she's mine, because she's a character that I conceive, but she's her own as well. So I think that it's just about doing the work, which is something that I've struggled with over the years, you know, honestly. I mean, I struggle with really getting into it, but I think it's really about doing the work, getting in it, staying in it, and being committed to it. You know, like Octavia Butler said something to the effect, I'm not quoting her verbatim, but it was like, you know, this isn't about, writing isn't about being inspired, it's about discipline. Right. So you write because you're a writer. You're not, you have to write. Yeah, you know, I don't feel like it any day. Right? It's never a day I get up and I'm like, I want to write. Right.
Well, let's talk.
Yeah.
Now that, you know, well, let's talk about your process, even if you are having a struggle. Like, what is your routine when you know that you have got to write this? You give yourself kind of a, you know, a deadline for yourself, or maybe it's a deadline for even, you know, a producing partner. How do you set up your routine? How is your process, whether it's a difficult character that's hiding from you, or something that is, you know, just flows?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to answer that question, obviously, but I think that it also opens up another conversation, which is getting out of our own way.
Absolutely.
You know, so, I mean, of course, we can talk about all of the racism inherent in Hollywood and all of the people in our way, and, like, that's real. And sometimes I feel like maybe that, in some indirect way, has informed me being in my own way. You know? Maybe it's just so exhausting. I'm like, what's the point? But then I'm also like, I've had amazing opportunities and connections, and, you know, I'm in my own way a lot. So I think, and, you know, with this quarantine, hopefully, like, part of the conversation will be like from a spiritual perspective in terms of artists, and just, you know, where we are spiritually, you know, and what we need to do to get out of our own way. So that, I think, is important, because I've had amazing opportunities before and just looked at them like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, hi.
That's cute. Hey, you know, as opposed to like.
I think that's all of us at some point. Like, we've got to figure out a way to clear to have some clearance.
Exactly.
And also, you know, reminding ourselves that we are worthy of this opportunity and to be okay if it's taking a minute.
Sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that's been my main struggle. When I'm able to push past that, just because I'm like, you're bugging. You know, for me, like, I'm an early morning writer. You know, if I'm waiting, and maybe it's part of my, you know, the BS for me. But if it's like 2 o'clock, I'm like, it's too late to write. But it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, no, at night. But for the most part, I'm an early morning writer. You know, and again, I think in terms of a process, because I've wasted a lot of time in a script, in screenwriting software, in final draft, like, without having done an outline, which I would never do again. I mean, again, writers write different ways, but without an outline. So you're just kind of, you know, headed to the store and not sure which way to go.
Right, right.
Right. And you will do great maybe in your first act. You'll get to your second act and be like, I don't know where I'm going. And if you're lucky enough to get to your third act, you probably haven't written anything that you know you want to share. You're stuck. And so I got stuck quite a bit. And it was just like pushing past the laziness and saying, no, I have to do this outline. So again, I think for me, the process is about research. And the process is about finding the story that's not the obvious story. So for me, it's like really looking at the theme and, you know, what is the message of the movie? Because it's there that I get to kind of play around with so many different things that you miss the opportunity to incorporate into your story, which is the thing that really gets under people's skin, especially in horror, if you don't do that. Right. You know, so for me, it's about doing the research. I read scripts. Now, one thing I do every day is read scripts. Okay. You know? And I don't think that a lot of writers, screenwriters really do that. Yeah. Like, you should be reading, you should be reading scripts all the time, you know, especially early on, you know, so I read scripts every day, you know, I read at least a script a day.
And that kind of informs kind of how maybe some of your writing can either take one direction or take another, or give you an example of something that you don't want to do, or is it just kind of just, you know, keeping, you know, warming up the muscle?
All of it, everything you said. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it may be more difficult to kind of tell with your own writing, but with other people's writing, like, you know when it's good and you know when it isn't. Right. Okay. And so you learn a lot about, you know, how to tell a story, different types of story devices, you know, what to do, what not to do, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, you know, how to tell a story of a particular genre. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, for me, and if I'm procrastinating about writing, then I just kind of resort to reading, and it keeps me in it so that when I do work up, you know, what I need to write, I feel a little bit more prepared. Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah, a lot, and I doubt if a lot of writers actually read script, or, you know, they might read novels to kind of, you know, move them around. But that's a great tip. Okay, so once if you've written what you've written, you're satisfied with what you've written, you're comfortable with the genre, you're comfortable with the characters. Let's talk a little bit about how you prepare when you want to direct. When you're directing your own piece, and also when you're hired to direct. So let's talk about when you're directing your own material. How do you prepare? Oh, wow. I mean, when you're directing your own material, I mean, for me, it's kind of like preparing all along. Like, when I'm writing, I'm thinking about what I want it to look like, I guess you would say. And so, I mean, I guess the process would be, you know, I finish my script, I send it to my producing partners, they give me feedback on the script, and Boogie does a budget, you know, and we hit up Mark. Right. Now we need the coins, Mark. Thanks. Coins, right. But yeah, I mean, so like, I've shadowed a lot, which is, you know, spending time on set with an established director on a television show, or even a feature film. Like I've, spent time with Malcolm D. Lee on his sets, and Stephanie Rooney, who's directed over 200 episodes of television. I shadowed her on the originals, and Stephen Gyllenhaal on Rectify. So, I had a certain way that I did things in my independent work, but there are things that I picked up in my hired work that I now pull over into my independent world. And so I think there are a lot of shortcuts that you can take in your own work. And that's fine if you're getting it done. But sometimes it's, kind of advantageous to kind of not take some of those shortcuts. So I shot lists, I have a lot of visual, inspirational types of things that I download from the internet, I do look.
Typically, I was going to ask you, do you typically do like a lookbook for each project?
Yeah, and so I think the thing about the advantage of working independently is that, you're more than just like a writer, director. You're like a development exec, basically. You're trying to sell your work, and it's not just about selling an idea. So yeah, I've done countless lookbooks, like extensive lookbooks, like what? So, so yeah, I mean, and I was like I said, I was like a graphic designer before.
Right. You got that down. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the writing part of it is so tedious that the lookbook part of it feels like somewhat of a release. Like, oh my God, I can pull like all these, images from other films and put them together and give someone a real visual representation. I can put together a color palette and let them know exactly it's fun, right? And I think that it really helps your producing partners or whoever you're pitching to, really get an idea. And it helps you kind of flesh out your idea. There have been times when I've been in my lookbook and going back to my script, like, wait a minute, hold up, there's something I might want to tweak here. And I think unless people know you're really serious about getting your work done. So, yeah, I do all that. And even with Queen Sugar, like we sit down with the DP and kind of have a conversation about, what your ideas are for the episode. And I had a lookbook, I was like, this is,
love it. I love it.
These are the things these are the shots that I hope we can get off, obviously within the parameters of what the show has already established as their visual look. I hope that we can get these shots off. This is what I would like to get off. And the DP was like, yo, let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. And I want to talk a little bit more about your Queen Sugar experience, but do you create lookbooks for every single project, even the very, very small, you're in the very beginning when you were just doing the small kind of documentaries, so you had a visual palette for those projects as well?
Not as extensive as now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like the return, the lookbook I have now is pretty extensive. For Shawn Bell, I didn't have a lookbook, but I did have, again, because it's like police brutality, I just had so much data and articles. And so I guess it was somewhat of a lookbook, but it looked different than what, It wasn't so much about shots and everything. It was more so about, creating or helping to convey the reality of the situation, knowing that, that would help people to develop the type of emotional response they needed to develop to hopefully put them to action.
Got it.
But yeah, the lookbooks are much more extensive now. Because, thankfully, I'm kind of at the point we're kind of going in to pitch and have conversations with networks or managers or aid, and it's for everyone. Like I have a meeting coming up this week, and I had to send over, something really extensive to my manager. So, I think it really is just about knowing your story and putting it together as much as you possibly can, right? I mean, at some point in your career, you won't have to do all that, right? But right
now, you got to have all the bells and whistles.
Whatever you need.
Right? Yeah. And it helps the person, especially if they're not as sophisticated in sense of story, it helps them really see, and then also, as you were saying, really kind of convey the emotional piece of it and what you want them to feel to get them to say, you are greenlit. Come on over here.
And for Black stories, I mean, like, one white exec was like, what's in a lake egg? You know what I mean? So it's like, this is an AK, and this is a voodoo dagger, and this is this, and this is that. Like, they don't know.
They don't know. And why is it? Then they need all the details. So it's really kind of be painting a very kind of specific picture.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Now tell me, let's go through a typical day. Well, first of all, when you got the Queen Sugar gig, and we, as most of us know, and if some of you don't, Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar that's on OWN, she has committed to making sure that she hires all women directors, quite a bit of Black women directors, but there's a different director for each episode. And so for you stepping into your episode, and you are sandwiched between two other visions, you know, the episode before you, the episode after you, how does that work with her camp? Do you, you did kind of touch upon that you came in with your own lookbook, but it's a continuing of the story, even though you have your specific episode. How was that for you, in terms of stepping into that type of space to direct?
Mm-hmm. So shout out to Ava.
Yeah. Shout out to Ava.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, because, you know, and I'll answer your question, but it's like probably a few times a week, I'm reacquainted with the impact that Queen Sugar had on my career, and that Ava has had on the lot. Not just the career, the lives of every woman that she's hired. And not just up and coming directors, but directors like Cheryl.
Yes.
Who's done, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Nima Barnett, Julie Dash.
Dash, the legends.
Folks that Hollywood probably would have never given any more attention to. And so what Ava's doing, like, again, I had shadowed for years. You know, you have stories of many directors who shadowed for years, who'd been in directing programs and still weren't getting an episodic. And it does something to you. And I don't even think that it's about like trying to rush anything. Like I tell people all the time, like, you know, film and television is an interesting type of dynamic where you can be really skilled and still not work. Right. And still not make money. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I have sisters that are doctors. One's an attorney. They went to school. I'm not saying it was an easy journey, but damn, they knew that they were going to go to medical school or go to law school, pass a bar, and go do what they do.
And do what they do.
It's
right.
Not necessarily that with film. And so, and we know why that is the case. And so I think what Ava has done, like, I don't even have words for it. You know, we're all in the DGA now. We all have help.
So amazing. So amazing.
Right. We have help. And that's why I said that it's a life-altering type of thing. Agents are calling, managers are calling. It shifts your life in ways that many women deserve for it to have been shifted and would never have been given the opportunity. So that's that.
Right.
Yeah. And so I didn't go in with a lookbook. Okay. Because, you know, you get in and you haven't had, you get your script when you get there. So you don't know what you have.
Okay. Got it.
And when you get there, the previous director, the director from the previous episode is still shooting their episode. So you get to spend a few days.
Oh, good. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I'm not sure if it's done like this on all shows, but on Queen Sugar, definitely. You come in, and so C. Fitz was the director who was directing episode 410, I believe. Yeah. I did 411. She's doing 410. So I got to sit with her for a couple days and meet the cast.
Nice.
And then, the director that did 412 came in and she was able to sit a few days with me. And so, a lot of first-time episodic directors, did Queen Sugar. So, you're like, what's happening? How is it? Is everybody cool? Like,
right. What's the temperature?
Right. You kind of getting the tea on everything. Yes. Previous director. And I mean, I will say that like Queen Sugar, like everyone kind of has the same energy and spirit that Ava has. Like it's the same mission statement. It's the same idea. These people are there to support you. I mean, you're a professional, you know what you're doing. You're not being coddled in any way, shape, or form, but you are being supported. And it's not, I mean, I felt more intimidated shadowing before. And it's like, I'm not even here to direct. Like, why do I feel this much tension? A lot of times I was like the only Black person on a set. shadow on some of these shows. So with Queen Sugar, you know, we see people that look like us, you know, in positions of leadership, producers, you know what I mean? And they're just there to help and support and guide. And so, yeah, you know, I got my script. You know, you're like waiting with bated breath to get your script. Like, oh my God, this is what happens in my episode. And so it just so turns out that with my particular episode, everything took place like inside. Like it was a very intimate episode. You know, a lot of coming to terms with things, transition, and Darla. So it was a lot of coming to terms, and it rained throughout the entire episode. So for me, it was like, okay, so now I have to work this special effects supervisor, and we have to make it rain. You know what I mean? We shoot on a sound stage in Metairie, and so that was fun. You know, and it worked for the type of work that I do. You know, like For Color Boys was like a really intimate type of story, like these intimate relationships between Black men in ways I think that we don't always see. So for me, I was able to really like kind of pull the type of visual aesthetic, create the visual aesthetic that's, you know, very much, I guess, my signature as a director. The script that I was given worked perfectly with, I think, my aesthetic as a director. And an amazing DP, and we sat down. I gave him some, you know, feedback on what I wanted to do, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do it," and we did it.
Okay. And how long was that process?
So it's like a 2-week process.
Okay. Is that from directing and then editing? Because you're also editing your own episode too, right?
Well, you sit in and
sit in the edit session. Okay.
Exactly, right. So like, you know, my independent work I edited too, which drives me crazy. I'm like, I don't want to edit this, right?
No,
but,
you don't want to do that part. We will sit though. We'll sit and get
right. Exactly. Okay. So with Queen Sugar, I had to fly out to LA to sit with an editor. Weeks later, after my episode shot.
Okay.
And so the whole process, I mean, I think I shot for like 6 days. And prior to that, I was there a few days on the previous episode. So it's almost like a 2-week process.
Okay. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And then, okay, so after that, so now you're in the DGA with insurance and perks and things that grown people, adult creators need in their lives. And so, and I'm sure that's a change as well as a relief, as well as, you know, support. And I'm sure that you are just very happy that you've finally been able to do that. However, you've been an amazing director for a long time. They're very lucky to have you, I will say that. So let's see. Can you describe either something that felt like a major win or something that felt like a fail that really informed your work?
Wow.
And you probably have to think about it.
A fail.
Well, you know, failures are all about learning. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, without calling names. I mean, For Color Boys was definitely challenging. And I think because it was my first scripted project, you know, when people, you know, it's challenging. I think a lot of times filmmakers think like if people reach out to me that they have the best of intentions, and they don't.
They don't. Not all the time, right?
Not all the time. And so, yeah, I've been, you know, tremendously blessed and lucky, but I've also been offered really crappy deals for my work over the years. And it's someone in this industry that's very established, very much a legend, who said to me, "Stop calling these people your brothers and sisters, because they're not." So that, you know, I think for me, coming from an activist background, we all look alike, we're all brothers and sisters in this struggle, like I had to really shift my thinking around that. And that has been a tremendous challenge for me. And it's different now because I have representation. I'm not even having conversations with people about money and stuff like that with my reps, but it's just the things that people will offer you, knowing that you wrote something, you developed something, and you know, and you're thinking about like, oh my God, I'm a Black woman, I'm a single mom, and I'm this and I'm that, and they don't care about any of that. You have a property that they want to acquire. And that's all that matters to them. And your personal situation and the fact that you deserve something doesn't matter. And so I think that that's been the biggest challenge for me. Just accepting that this is a business, this is not a mosque, this is not a community circle, this is not a drum circle, this is not our you know, our community in Brooklyn. This is not that. This is a business that has its roots in very racist, sexist ideas and practices and structures, and that many of the people that have been in it for a long time, be they Black or white, are 9 times out of 10 is kind of regurgitating the same sickness. And so you have people like Ava who will come along and do something that could have been done, right?
Right.
It's as revolutionary and life-changing as it is, and she could be one of the few, or kind of spark something, and so many other people are now saying, oh wow, or just like, you know, just like all the stuff that's happening now, and folks are racist as hell and saying, oh, I looked at this video of myself and I realized that I was doing something wrong. Like, this isn't rocket science, it's just something that's been maintained. And so you have a lot of artists that have come up in the ranks who are, I think, being very much abused and taken advantage of by established producers. And they want it so bad that they go through it not realizing, and even thinking, there have been times when I've complained and I've been like, but oh my God, this is an amazing opportunity. And it's just like, yeah, but you shouldn't be treated this way.
Right.
Offer $5 for your work.
Right.
And I'm not even exaggerating sometimes.
I know.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. And it doesn't bother me as much anymore because I'm just clear about where I am and what this is. And also because, you know, I gravitate toward work and people that feels like home. Queen Sugar felt like home. I got to come home to New Orleans to work on that particular show. So my, you know, prayer to spirit, to God, to the universe is just to keep me protected and to keep me in spaces that honor me. And even though this isn't, you know, those community spaces, that I have a more, you know, healing journey than some others have. And if I'm in a position to do that for others, then I hope, you know, that I am soon.
Yeah, I love that. We have just a few more minutes, and so I'm going to ask you the typical question. What would be your advice for someone just getting started as a writer-director, and or someone who is maybe kind of just trying to maintain, you know, and sustain visibility and viability? What are some gems, some words of advice that you could share?
Excuse me, do your work.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, do your work. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And it's funny, I have a really good friend, I won't even call his name, I should. He drives everybody crazy. He's like 30, okay? And he feels like he's behind in life. And I'm like, dude.
What? 30?
Relax. He's a talented filmmaker. And he's like, how do I do this? And how do I get here? And how did you get into it? And I'm like, dude, like, I'm my age. Like, give me a break. You're 30. So there's a lot of that. It's annoying. So don't do that to people. You know what I mean? Relax and realize like this is a journey. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes you getting your work done. Like, put yourself in a position where people want what you have.
Right.
People don't respond well to desperation.
No, they can smell it, they can see it.
And I think that if you exhibit a certain amount of agency and say, hey, I can get this done with or without you. You know, and I think that's the thing about coming from the independent film world. Like, you have an idea of your project at the $5,000 level, the $50,000 level, the $500,000 level, the $5 million. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you coming from the independent film world, like, you know how to get things done. So get your work done, right? You know, apply to the programs, the writing programs, the directing programs. You know, look for mentorship without being a nuisance, right? You know, if there's one that is showing an interest in you, then yeah, you know, learn all that you can learn, but be diligent and get your work done. Get out of your own way, you know, and work on your spiritual and mental and emotional health and well-being just as much. Like, to me, that's getting your work done as well.
Right.
Get all that work done, and when you're able to get all the support you need, your support team, just like your attorney, you know, your manager, which is something that you can get before you get to a certain level of your career. Like, people 9 times out of 10 can't even pay an agent to mess with you until it's time. But you get a manager, and you can get possibly an attorney as someone to kind of help you navigate things. And just be in it for the right reasons, because it's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some good tips. Let's see. We got 2 more minutes. So I know you can't talk about anything that you are kind of in the thick of it, but do you have a vision for yourself? The next 3 to 5 years, where do you see yourself?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, so I'm working on my first feature film. It's in development right now, with Malcolm D. Lee's company. I can't say that much.
Okay.
And it's a horror film.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
And I've been attached to direct another horror film that will hopefully shoot in 2021. And, you know, 3 to 5 years, wow. I mean, I just want to be doing exactly what I want to be doing without any difficulty around getting it done, which is directing television shows and films, preferably sci-fi and horror, and, you know, providing opportunities for other people who want to do the same thing. You know, just living a healthy, wholesome life, hopefully outside of America, seriously. You know, and just telling stories for and about people who look like me, you know, in ways that, you know, we haven't seen those stories told.
Okay, well, that sounds fantastic. And I think that's a great gem and a great vision to end on. Thank you so much, Stacey, for sharing your time with us. Thank you, all of you who are out there who hopefully got and had some, a pen and paper to write down some of her gems that she was dropping. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, be safe and blessed.